Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Thursday, 3 p.m. GMT, and I say this every single time. It is sunny in Milton Keynes, and I promise you it is. The sun is streaming through the curtains, and it always shines on MKAI Thursday, even in winter. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm hoping there'll be lots and lots of people joining us here on LinkedIn. You can see already we have an incredible panel, a credible discussion panel. We've done our forum already this week. We've done the prepared stuff. This is the anything goes. Let's get into this topic in a real way. Discussion. It's unplanned. We're going to see how it goes, but I've brought some great friends with me today. I'm going to go around in the order that I see people. I think it might be the same for you. We'll find out where you are, make sure we got those diverse perspectives today. A quick 20 to 30-second intro on who you are, and then Vibhab will get us started. Renato, you are on my screen. Where are you and who are you?
Hi, Richard. I'm Renato Santana. I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. I work at FCamara Group. I'm a digital business consultant, and I wrote many articles about AI. For MKAI, it was 2 articles. One was about ESG metrics in data governance, and the last one was about a strategy for organizations how to build an AI strategy.
You're very, very welcome. Right. So I'm UK. So that's continent number 1. Hello, Dr. Manboob. Hello, Dr. Odelia. 2 doctors so far. That's a good start, isn't it? So continent number 1, Europe. Continent number 2, South America. Right. Vibhav, we're going to come to you next. Where are you and who are you?
Hi, my name is Vibhav. I am an IP lawyer based out of New Delhi, India. I am also an AI enthusiast. I spend some time thinking on working in part of certain organizations like For Humanity, and I give some time to MKAI. My goal is to demystify AI issues from a non-technical perspective so that it becomes comprehensible for people who are thinking on it.
Amazing. Continent number 3. Okay, Timi, welcome. Who are you? Where are you?
I'm Timi Olagunju from Nigeria, right, in the continent of Africa. I'm a lawyer, a tech lawyer, and a policy consultant. I focus in the intersection of tech law and policy and how that drives the overall prosperity of people and nations. It's a pleasure being here. I'm sure it's going to be exciting.
It's a pleasure to have you here. 4 speakers, 4 continents, but I feel that we've maxed out. I think we're going to find the same continents now as we move to our next row of speakers. Jhalak, you're next on my screen. You're very, very welcome. Whereabouts are you today, and can we hear a bit about you?
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me here today. Very excited and great to see so many friends from many different parts of the world and exchange perspectives. I work with the Center for Communication Governance, which is an academic research center at the National Law University in Delhi, where I'm typically based. And it's, we work across technology policy issues, including regulation of artificial intelligence. So looking forward to this conversation today.
Wonderful. You're very welcome. Everybody knows that we love lawyers in MKAI. We're a special home for lawyers, a safe place. Rupa, where are you? And let's learn about you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And first of all, I'd like to thank Richard. I'm a great fan of MKAI community, and it's completely inclusive and inclusion of diversity. And every time I interact with MKAI community, the team, all the team, whether it is Karen, Alex, Webhub, Adelia, Hazel, and there's a lot of positive vibes, a lot of positive energy, and it's lovely to be at MKI even every time. So about me, my name is Rupa Singh. I'm the founder and CEO of Ai-Beehive, and I'm on the mission to impact more than 1 million students in the field of artificial intelligence. We have since last 6 months, we have conducted more than 50 workshops and seminars, non-funded workshops and seminars, educating universities in India, for students and faculties about around AI and ethical considerations of AI. And we believe that artificial intelligence should not be limited only to the tiny elites, but it should also reach underprivileged section of society, so that everybody can reap the benefits of technologies. And yeah, and I'm working on my book, which is AI ethics with Buddhist perspective, and I'm hoping to release it by January next year. And yeah, and recently I've been awarded as Entrepreneur of the Year 2021 by Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh for my contribution and around AI and spreading awareness around AI. So, and yeah,
Amazing.
and one more thing I would like to share, that we believe in MCA framework, which is mindset, concept, and application, where we see that there is no dearth of knowledge in this internet of world, but the students right now, the younger generation, they are distracted by constant social media, and they lack self beliefs, and we help students coming over their self-limiting beliefs, and we believe that every human have the potential to excel in their field of their interest. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We're in good company today. Johan, great to see you.
Good to see you, Richard, and everyone. Thank you. I love these events. I love listening in. I listened in earlier this week, maybe just to prepare myself. You know, they say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I'm always in the right room. That's how it feels. So many smarter people that I can learn from. But I join Timi as an African. I'm in Johannesburg. Yeah, in South Africa, we had a very dark, rainy day. I've put on extra lights, and suddenly the light is out. It's a beautiful summer day. But so I work for PwC in the smart automation or intelligent automation space as a team leader and management consultant, although I don't speak on their behalf. You know, if they're a consultant, they teach you these things. I do work with the Institute of IT Professionals in South Africa. And then my big passion is really writing and thinking the societal impact. I've got a 7-year-old boy, what drives me is his future. Will he, when I'm still alive and he's 35 or 40 or 50, will he look at me and my peers and say, "Why did you screw this up? It was in your hands to steer this technology in the right direction." And then lastly, I write weekly for Business Day, a local paper here, also for Sunday Times and others, but all about facial recognition, the metaverse. But I'm not much of a techie. It's just how is it impact unemployment and healthcare and the like. So that's really my passion, Richard. And again, thanks for this opportunity. Nice to meet you all.
Amazing. Yeah, can I see your fingers 1 second? Just hold them up.
Mine?
Yeah.
Huh?
Why? Well, I just thought they would have kind of like have worn down a bit, you know, because you just type so much. You write so much. You are incredible. You are a prolific writer, and you share them with me, and I'm so glad you do. You're welcome here. Thank you so much for being here. So Jhalak, you are a new joiner, a new friend for us, and you're in a great company. But Renato contributes to and collaborates with MKI with his incredible writing. Timi, Johan have been on our previous events before in our forums. And Rupa and Rupa and MKAI, we're collaborating with Ai-Beehive on content and delivery. So we truly are in good company here. Maybe we could even say as a family, perhaps. We do use that expression a bit in MKAI. Vibhav, back with you. Let's jump into today's topic. Set the scene for us. Let's see what we can achieve today.
Right. Thank you, Richard, and thank you for those wonderful introductions. We really have a great panel today. So the topic today is we're looking at licensing of artificial intelligence, and the buzzwords are practical, critical, or political. I'll come to that. Licensing of artificial intelligence, we're talking about from a social license perspective. Think maybe from the perspective, maybe loosely, maybe corporate social responsibility or social licensing in terms of what AI may owe to society. Quick starting this conversation, a couple of points I want to make for our audience, which could be from diverse backgrounds. One, because when you're thinking of AI as a social license, a very common thing that has come up in the past, AI is a general purpose technology, which means it impacts everything. It's like the steam engine, it's like electricity, it's like the internal combustion engine, which gave rise to car, trucks. So that's one aspect which is relevant if you're thinking of a social license. Two, much like electricity, electricity is a good example. Everyone remembers Frankenstein. Frankenstein is like the uh, invention that went wrong, went out of control. So somehow similar to Frankenstein, AI, just like being a general purpose technology like electricity, there's a simultaneous narrative about how AI could go wrong, probably that treads on artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence. We're not focusing on that today, but the point is when you're talking about a social license and we're talking about a situation where we're building trust, that narrative will play a part. So this conversation is just not about what AI is today, it is also about what we perceive it to be. That's the second point. Third point, AI can be applied in different industries. That again becomes relevant for social license. And I'll just pick up a couple of industries that were actually mentioned in the Indian government's task force report of 2018. And a couple of them, just to give us context, they talk about manufacturing, fintech, healthcare, agricultural food processing, education, retail and customer engagement. So the point being, when you have a country that is focusing on developing AI, looking at these sectors as AI, we'd expect that the industries are broader and we have, let's say, an omnipresence of where AI could be applied. The final point, of course, which is something that we've discussed in the past in terms of AI, is that bias is a major issue, and to come to the point, if we embed bias, it sort of perpetuates and make things worse. Not touching greater detail, but another a point that we must think when you're thinking from a social license perspective. Coming to the questions. So this introduction opens up to 5 points that I want to ask the panel to think on. We could come back to it later. The first point, when we're talking about a social license, can we go to everyone? Can we really? Will everyone understand? Who is our audience when we're talking about a social license? Because, for example, there's a concept called truth bias. Our brain accepts information the way it is without really checking it. Fact checking fake news, if you are infuriated by it, that's something that comes into play. So will that make it practical? Second, if we can't go to everyone, is there someone that we really need to go to? Is there a subset? So is it critical for us? I mean, is it like for people in policy like Timi and Jhalak, they would probably have some ideas. Is there a core set that we must consult? And coming to the going to everyone, probably something that falls within Rupa's domain, whether we have, when we're looking at expanding knowledge of AI, is it practical to really reach everyone? Third, political. The point is this only posturing? Is this, well, to make it more contextual, is it something related to climate change? Is it just conversation, but we're really never going to achieve something and we're going to keep talking about it for another 10 years and we'll still be talking about social licensing and not reach there? And finally, to build trust, do we build trust through the concept of a social license? Do we build trust by building trust within communities? Or are we approaching this concept itself is incorrect and we have to build trust in other ways? Just a couple of thoughts on AI and the questions that this topic raises for us to get started.
Richard, you are mute.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's okay. It gives us a moment of silence to take in Vibhav's welcome. So thank you so much. We'll keep that in mind as our North Star as we go through today. We run this for about an hour. Now, I know I think Jhalak's going to drop off around then a little earlier than then, but we're going to actually keep this open a little longer today because it's a wider subject. We've got more contributors, so we'll go a little bit longer today. But make sure you add your comments on the chat. Put questions up if you want, but we actually love to really hear your opinions on this, on other subjects, so that we can incorporate them in. I see Mario's here, Arpit's here as well. And then due to the API constraints, we have LinkedIn user. So whoever you are, you're very welcome, but that's what it shows up on our screen here on StreamYard. Johan, let's come to you first. What resonates immediately from those points that Vibhav's brought up today as our North Star in this conversation?
Look, I think, Vibhav, you've touched on so many relevant topics. It's a topic for a dissertation, never mind an hour-long conversation. what I just and what I also like about these events is that people have different lenses on the topic, so we can learn from each other, which is great. I still think people, especially technologists, view AI as a great new tool. It's very exciting, machine learning, IoT, conversational AI. But it's like there's a tsunami coming our way, and we can already, see the sea levels rising. The societal impact of this technology is a lot more serious than I think many people appreciate. And that's why we have to debate and talk and educate ourselves, not in a negative, dystopian, scaremongering kind of way, because this technology can really change our lives, change the lives of our children. If we think of healthcare and education topics, Vibab, that you've already touched on, it's almost like in the evolution of humanity, we have a once in a generation opportunity to get this right. My concern, though, and again, I'm not a pessimist, but I would rather say a realist. If I look at human nature, the fact that we are selfish, tribal, territorial, we will most likely seriously screw this up. I hope we don't. And that's why we have to talk about these things, But if it's about me and my children eating, or you and your children eating, what are we going to do? If we think already of the arms race, the AI arms race around nation states, so it's imperative that we talk about this. And maybe just to comment on one of the things you've said, Viba, this impacts everyone. We should start from an academic point of view. We definitely should start from a policy and a government point of view. But your so-called every man or every woman in the street, whether they know it or not, it is busy impacting them, and it will definitely impact their children. So this is one of the most relevant webinars I've been on this year, and I'm very excited about that, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johan. Oki as well, welcome here. Jhalak, if I can come to you, Johan calls it a tsunami, and I think certainly MKAI echoes his thoughts about how serious this detriment can be. But in your words, what do you think he means? What do you think we mean when we talk about this being so damaging, so concerning? What's the story there?
I think, a lot of people tend to look at technology impacts on individuals, and there's a lot of conversation around the impact of technology on individual rights. So even not that you can draw a parallel with the way data protection regulation has evolved, but if you do look at some lessons we take from there, there's been so much focus on, okay, how does this data collection impact my privacy rights as an individual? But there are broader systemic impacts that come from, say, the collection of data, impacts that go all the way up to impacting the way democratic institutions function, democratic discourse flows on social media platforms, the kind of profiling that happens of individuals on social media platforms, the kind of filter bubbles, and the way all of that pans out. So there are larger systemic impacts of these things. And similarly with artificial intelligence, right? You may have AI that's being used to, discharge certain welfare benefits by governments, or AI that's being used for education purposes of students. But what are the larger systemic impacts that we see? And that kind of links back to Johan's point of the tsunami, right? So the one question is, okay, is this technology on the whole good or bad? And not that there are any, black and white answers with any of these things, but even if at an individual level we don't really see a problem with with the way technology is, when you sort of piece together the larger implication it has for society, I think we do need to be thinking about that as well. So I'll probably just stop there and hear thoughts of our other panelists.
Yeah, that's perfect. There's lots more to add on to that, but let's get around this room first of all and get a sense of the energy and the thoughts. Timi, let's come to you. So let's just set the scene a little bit more here. So what work's being done right now? I mean, people are aware of this. What's the current bulk of work in the industry, do you think, to try and mitigate what we're hearing as being described by Jhalak and Johan there?
Well, basically, issues of fundamental human rights are key issues to incorporate in the formation of anything. But then when you look at the concept of, social licensing, I see that there seems to be an emphasis on the products, right? Social licenses of AI end products in that context. But then it goes beyond that. It goes to what I call the PSP, which is the process, the standards, and also the products. What is the process through which a certain, AI evolves? What's the process, right? So social licensing, it should be more dealt with from a more fundamental or foundational point of view if we want to achieve, issues around human rights rather than just the end product, which is the AI, the processes, of how it came to be. Because, like I like to say, and the ladies know better, that if the foundation be destroyed, what can the makeup artist do than put powder, right? So the foundation for the evolution, is basically processes. So how do companies, right? How do these companies recruit their staff, for example? Is their staffing inclusive, right? To reflect the general broad view of what, we want to achieve in terms of end product. And also, secondly, is the fact that when it comes to the concept of who the stakeholders is, we have asked the key question about the stakeholders, right? Now, so the point there is the fact that when you look at the stakeholders, there seems to be an emphasis, when it comes to social licensing, there seems to be an emphasis on the public, the end users, but it is quite limited because that concept is much more broader than that. It involves the employees of the company. It involves the stakeholders, which includes even the shareholders. It involves the general public. I like to see the concept of social licensing more from a 3P perspective: people, planet, and profits. There needs to be a synergy of all three in order to achieve socially conscious, environmentally conscious, and economically oriented or conscious AI. Because look, there must be incentivizing or incentives for the producers, the companies who are trying to make efforts in trying to ensure that our lives become better through artificial intelligence or whatever purpose they have in mind, right, are driven by profits. So until on the concept of social licensing incorporates those three realities, we may just keep having academic conversations. And then lastly, point I want to raise in this question that you've asked is the fact that, you see, the concept of social licensing is not new, right? I'm African as well as Johan. So we can talk about the concept of community acceptance, where, a person is validated by their community, right? I am sure that you have it in other cultures or societies, where there's a certain kind of social cohesion and social validation. And so when you take it a step further, now let's look at certain other industries outside technology, in the core sense of artificial intelligence. Let's look at mining in South Africa, for example. The concept of social licensing to operate, SLO, slow, is something that is quite embedded in the mining processes, right? And so the key question is, can you have social licensing without the place of government, authorities, or regulations becoming partners in achieving social licensing? That is a key question for me.
Timi, thank you so much for that. And you're right. Actually, the mining is one area where the social license has been forced upon the companies who are extracting and polluting and so on. And we can hopefully draw on those references and perhaps look at the similarities and differences today in a slightly different domain and perhaps a more difficult to understand domain. Renato, to you next. When Timi talks, I love what he's saying, and it had a hallmark to me of universal basic income, in the sense of when you first hear it, you think, oh, well, that sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds like we can redistribute some wealth and give people a platform of living where, the essentials, the travel, the food, the energy are taken care of and become human rights. But then you look into it and you think, well, what does universal mean? What does basic mean? And whose terms are these?
Yeah.
And do you mean that San Francisco is going to be sending money to Bangladesh now? Or do you mean San Francisco is just sending money to San Francisco, where Silicon Valley is? So it starts to get a bit confusing to me about exactly how does this work? And then, of course, you get great meaning from your work. And if that disappears, what does that mean for kind of your own sense of purpose and worth as a human being? So the point is, when you dig into these areas, they're harder than they sound. So the three areas that Timi talked about and the kind of justice that we need there, do we have some sort of vision around that, or do we get confused about how that's actually going to work in the real world, a little bit like my confusion around UBI? What do you think to that?
First, I think UBI is a discussion that's open yet. There are pros and cons. In Brazil, we have Bolsa Família and other, for many years, help lift people from poverty. During the pandemic, we had people from gig economy that need help to survive. I think this is a path forward, but you have the meaning, a purpose. People need meaning and purpose in order to live a fruitful life. So I think the discussion is more like the Vibhav told in the beginning. He made 5 points about how to address the communities impacted in social licensing. I think we need to spread the benefits of technology adoption society. There is a concept of society 5.0 from the Japan government that is spread the benefits of the exponential product gains and of technology to the whole society. So bringing to the philosophy of technology from Marshall McLuhan, he said that technology is an extension of the human being. Technology extends our reach in the environment. So social licensing, for me, should be viewed as all communities impacted having a seat on the table, like in a data governance committee. I already wrote about that in your article. So kind of imagine that you could have in each companies that have big AI projects, you establish data governance committees or AI committees. The name doesn't matter, but you have two different stakeholders because they are kind of impacted with the algorithms, in order to have diversity of points of views of how to tackle the problems that arise from the adoption of AI. So I think the private sector can have a huge role with ESG, having these committees in order to address these problems in an ethical way.
Thank you, Renato. There's some points there that I want Rupa to pick up on. We'll say a quick few hellos before we come to you, Rupa. We've got Timi from Nigeria, Chudamambi. My English tongue does not do names very well, but I'm trying to give you a shout out for coming along. We've got Chief Adewale as well as around, Sagan, Chantal as well. You are very, very welcome today. Rupa, Renato raised some really interesting points, and you have a great passion for Vibhav's first point about serving everybody with AI. Where do you see the role and the feasibility of a social license? We'll get onto the political stuff a little bit later, but is this like a seat at the table, a seat at the board? What's the vision here for how you have this dialogue and understand the impacts of your algorithms and platforms on the communities that end up benefiting or not from the work you're doing?
Okay. Thanks, Richard, for asking this question. Interesting question. So let me first tell what are the consequences of these algorithms. And as we know that now, earlier we used to take decisions and our lives are governed by how we take decisions. And now authorities are shifting from humans to algorithms, and algorithms are taking decisions, instead of we taking decisions. And it is because of the problem is not the individual automated decisions. For example, when we are getting recommendation about some products or services, for example, watching videos from Netflix, or purchasing some products recommended by Amazon or Flipkart and so on. The real problem is the integrated automated decisions, and the volume and velocity at which these technologies are being adopted, and also the affordability and the cheaper these technologies are to adopt. And we don't deny that there is a collaborative, collective, and distributed wisdom of embedded in these technologies. But we also have collaborative, collected, and distributed stupidity. And with now we have wearable devices with biosensing technologies, right? And where companies now know you more than you know yourself. They know your preferences, they know how your body and mind is working, and what are your choices, who are you as a person. The companies know better than you. And in the history of mankind, rulers and emperors, they always wanted to know what their people are doing, but they could never understand what their people think. But with the help of technology such as AI, now we also have this capability of knowing what we think, and how our body and mind works, whether we are watching any video, or whether we are watching any we are listening to our music, or we are eating at a favorite restaurant, or even while we are interacting with others. And if we are so predictable, we can also be hackable, right? And the use of, and it has been shown in recent studies that people who rely on Google search engines, and social media for their news and information, they are they are in the risk of targeted they are at the risk of getting into collective social bubble. That means people with the same likes and same preferences, they are given the same kind of news, which can also result in negative consequences, such as misleading information leading to polarization, or based on commercials, or political purpose. So these are the impacts that we see because of the algorithms. And also, when we have these technologies, it is reaching to the wealthier parts of the country, while at the cost of uh, people at the poorer parts of the country. So and the hidden costs are the environmental cost, where the poorer parts of the country, they are exploited, labor exploitation, or the cost is also the pollution created by extracting raw materials or waste materials, disposal of waste due to the manufacturing of our IT products and tools, our desktop monitors, mobile phones, and so on. So that is a cost on environmental, you know, uh, uh, effects. And so there is always a hidden cost, and due to the consumer, and We have always blamed businesses and capitalist approach for most of the global problems, such as climatic effects. And I remember during my childhood, my and most of us could relate to that, that our parents used to write a list of grocery items when every week. And I have seen my parents writing grocery list every week, and they would just stick to those items. But now, since we have recommendations of various products, whether we need it or we don't need it, we just buy them based on our impulsive reactions. And that is again a cost to our environment. We are consuming more than what we actually need. So there are a lot of negative consequences, along with, as we say that these are high gain and high risk technologies, and we need to mitigate those risks so that we create a beneficial and ecological society, not only for human beings but also environment around us. And if we don't think about our future generations, who are the real stakeholders of this planet, uh, we our future generations, they are going to stay in this planet for a much longer time than we are going to stay. But unfortunately, they do not have their say in these kind of discussions and policy making and regulations. So where, as Weber said, whether it is practical, it all depends upon our intention and motivation, that what kind of world we need, and that requires political intervention. We need a global cooperation, because the challenges that we are facing today, it is a global challenge. Climate change cannot be a national issue; it is a global issue. And
Yes.
it is quite challenging, because we are many of us, we have different preferences, coming from different society, different backgrounds,
Yeah, I want to
economy.
come to that, Rupa. I want to come to the global versus local. So hold that thought, because I want to explore that with the team a little bit more, because it came up in the
Sure.
chat. I love what you said. And I once went into a supermarket and somebody had left their shopping list on the trolley. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to buy what they like and just see what it's like and just get out of this filter bubble. And I wasn't a vegetarian then, so it's a little easier, but it didn't really work out. I think I should shop my own list in the future. Yeah, I'm coming to you, and Rupa, I want to hear more from you in just a moment. Quick, easy question, perhaps, but what lessons are we learning about foresight? You know, we've done tech now for a few decades. What are we learning about the power of foresight, if anything? That's for Johan.
Well, okay, sorry, it's for Jan. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Firstly, I like what Rupa said about stupidity. I always say you can't automate stupidity, and to have artificial intelligence, you hope that there's actually real intelligence, guys. So very good points, Rupa. Look, I think our ability to foresee the future through technology, through predictive analytics and the like, is so much better. On the other hand, the world is changing so quickly that I think even with all our technology, I don't know if we can predict many of the things that's coming our way. There are some things that will stay the same. I always say that human nature will not be changed by technology. Our fundamental humanity will not be changed, but the risks to that humanity will definitely be different. So, and if you read what futurists write, and I love this quote, that a futurist is a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat that does not exist. you know, so how do we these days predict the future when things are changing so rapidly? I mean, who could have predicted the lives we're living now 2.5, 3 years ago? You know, wearing masks and fourth waves and who knows what. So, but hopefully we can learn from the past trends. If we think of Kodriev and others who speak about these so-called K waves of human innovation, I think when it comes to political predictions, together with technological predictions, we most likely are better equipped now to make those predictions and have some foresight and to have learned from our past mistakes. I just don't know if human nature will allow it. And maybe just to end off, if we think of the US, I mean, the previous administration basically gave the middle finger to climate change. And now the current administration is trying to do a bit more. And we saw what happened with the events in the last week or two, great gains in climate change. But, there's one political change in a big economy and we're screwed again. So foresight, Richard, I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I'll go to my local casino right now and win a few million. I don't know if we're getting better at it.
I was worried you'd say that, but I wanted to ask you anyway. Jhalak, a similar question. By the way, by all means, pick up on what you've just heard Johan speak about and Rupa, but also I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are we learning about the communication of these technologies and how to make it understandable to those outside of the discipline.
So I think it's hard, right? Like, I think we do need to think of ways to communicate these technologies in non-technical terms, which makes it accessible to people, because that's what really builds trust. And, I think the part of the social license discussion is helping to build trust with communities. And I think it's important to build social license with communities, because I also think one of the major issues we need to think about in terms of AI deployment is the fact that a lot of AI tech is developed in, say, the Western world or, in China, and it's being sort of imported, exported across the world and being implemented in very different contexts. It may be developed in high resource settings and, is going to be deployed in a low resource setting. It may be, trained on certain kinds of data sets of certain ethnicities of people, and, the ethnicity of the people in the context in which it's going to be deployed may be very different. So I think context really matters. And one of the ways to, navigate the challenges of context is to sort of build that engagement with the community you're looking to deploy it in and get that feedback. That said, I think that's easier said than done, because I think it's very difficult to find ways to engage with communities and break down complex things. What is the level of interest and capacity, technical capacity to engage with these things? I mean, take a simple idea like consent and meaningful consent, for all the different websites we visit and the privacy policies none of us, we're all relatively more plugged into the technology policy law space. And we'd probably be able to navigate those, privacy policies and really understand what we're saying okay to. How much do we do that? There is like a lot of burden that sort of comes with asking people to
Give her a second. Okay.
Richard?
Can you hear me?
Yes. You were
Okay.
just patiently waiting. Don't worry.
Okay. So I've just switched off my camera because I think license is sort of one of the
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not getting enough of you, Jhalak, at the moment. Can you hear us okay? Okay. Give a little second to come back. We were on the subject of how do we communicate and how do we gain some more foresight, that easy challenge. Renato, what would you add to that conversation?
Hi, Richard. Adding to the conversation about foresight, William Gibson was the father of the cyberpunk movement. He said, "The future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed." In other words, it's the art of observing the present attentively in search of trends, something that some call futurism. This brings great benefits in the long run, since there are opportunities that are not perceived by other peoples, and if you take calculate bets, it can pay dividends in the long run.
Yes. So we'll see if Jhalak comes back in just a moment. I want to dive more into that, Renato. I just want to jump across to, because there's some... Are you there, Jhalak? We have a little trouble hearing you, but that's all right. We're very patient.
Could you hear me, Richard, or not?
Right now we can hear you fine, yeah. It's very good. So just give Jhalak a moment longer. Vibhav, I'll ask you this, and then Timi, it'd actually be very good to get your thoughts as well on this, because it's a fairly simple question, really. Can we trust artificial intelligence when we know we don't have proper representation in place? Or how do we trust if we don't have that representation in place?
So we're starting off on a the plus in this is that you're already aware of the fact that we don't have enough representation in place. I mean, so I think we're starting off on a positive footing in that sense, awareness. From my perspective, I think there are a couple of things. One, obviously, legal frameworks, good, bad, ugly, when and if and when they arrive, only currently probably data protection principles and data privacy issues. Legal frameworks will try to address a certain level of trust, at least because you would have a certain level of, for lack of better words, parity or debate in terms of putting that legal structure in place. Second, I think there is a technological element to it, which is why I said the awareness is important, because if you have awareness of lack of representation, then I believe this topic has come up in our conversations or in MKI conversations or previous events, is the concept of synthetic data. I believe where you don't have representation and then you guide around yourself with the privacy aspects, and you balance that out. Third element, so there's technology, then there's law, so there's two verticals. Three, in context into our context, is society. And I want to pick up on a topic that was brought up in the conversation here, is political will, right? The society engagement is that Timi brought that up, and it's an important point. Is that if you're looking at the concept of social license, then we do need a certain level of political will to engage with society, right? I mean, Jhalak was bringing up an interesting point about how do you engage. So it's about also the objective and what we're getting out there. So to answer this question, there's the legal frameworks, there's the work done on the technology side to build trust, and third, there is the larger social aspect to it, which can be community engagement, which, well, it with depending on which region of the globe you are, I would assume, depending on the importance of technology, would also require certain level of political will. And I say that in the context of social welfare schemes, or maybe the kind of work maybe probably Rupa is doing, or where we're reaching out to people who may not have the bandwidth to really understand it to the nuance, and therefore you need a certain level of messaging that gets across the point.
Thank you. Timi, I mean, just the fact that you're located in the continent of Africa, there are, vast numbers of people who, might be very valuable inputs into these systems, but we haven't set the technology in place, have we, to be able to do that? How do we address that? How do we get more voices in when you have to be digital in the first place to be able to have a voice in this domain?
Well, that's a very important question you raised, Richard. And Vibhav has raised something I call the LTS. I like acronyms a lot, which is the legal, technology, and society, right? However, when it comes to inclusion, particularly when the odds are skewed towards a specific continental demography. As you know that artificial intelligence is built on the fulcrum of data. Data is the core foundation for everything that we're talking about in terms of artificial intelligence. And when you talk about the key corporate players, you find out that it's no doubt that they are much more in the US. You talk of the big data companies like, let's talk about Google, Amazon, talk about that. They are mostly in maybe Seattle or somewhere in California, right? Largely. So, firstly, we need to admit the reality that a representation may only be, equal representation in that sense may only be a mirage, right? In that sense. However, how do we ensure that voices that are not represented or do not have capacity, perhaps because they don't even have access to data, or they are not digitized, or they don't have, internet, or they cannot even access mobile phones and the likes? How do you ensure some subcontinental, cross-continental representation? And that's why I am of the opinion that because of the nature of its evolution and the fact that representation would always be a mirage, and also the fact that, look, if you leave the issue of social licensing and licensing in terms of regulation to national boundaries, there might be a challenge also of how do you ensure social licensing in dictatorial regimes? For example, in North Korea, right? Where the voice of the leader is the voice of the people, right? How do you ensure social licensing in, for example, China, where there is a lot of censorship, right? So how do you ensure licensing, social licensing, in an age where there is misinformation and disinformation? So the quality of social licenses across national boundaries would only be limited to the capacity of the demand side to be able to understand the nuances involved. Huge challenge. Hence, to ensure representation, I submit that there is a need for us to have global governance frameworks. We can improve. Look at the internet, for example. The Internet Governance Forum, has some inclusive platform for civil society, for businesses, for technical committees and technical experts to come in place. You have, for example, you talk about the IEE, right? It's a technical framework, right? That is outside the government. Can we trust governments to rely only on regulations in that sense? No. So we need to start building certain governance frameworks for artificial intelligence. It may not be perfect, right? Just like someone mentioned in the comment that WHO has found it entirely difficult to even set up a common framework for dealing with COVID and procedures, right? However, one thing about frameworks is that it provides a certain templates from which others can be part of the process or can engage. And so we can learn from the internet governance frameworks and develop a more robust, more inclusive framework on a global level that would ensure that even continents and nations who will never in the next 20 or 30 years be part of the AI game can have a voice in it. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Timi. Really appreciated those thoughts. Rupa, we're going down one particular path, which is an incredibly important path, which is both the kind of inputs into these systems and the biases and the exclusion of these systems. But there's obviously many others, particularly older people that may not be as digital and as comprehensive about technologies. And of course, there's children who are exposed to these systems in every possible way, but cannot, they cannot sign terms and conditions, and they cannot really comprehend this. So it's testament to the size of the challenge, I think, isn't it, when we think about children in this space?
Okay. Yeah, so as we see that now children they are accessing more and more social media, and even I've seen toddlers, uh, they do not eat food until and unless they watch their favorite cartoon videos. So that's really a difficult thing, that because toddlers cannot be, or children cannot they do not understand the consequences of technologies, but the parents have to be aware, and how they are introducing the technology to their children, as well as uh, okay, so yes, so we see an important role of teachers as well as parents to educate children for the use and misuse of technology. And obviously, we cannot have policies for children, but uh, or maybe algorithms, or when they detect that this is being accessed by children, so they can also create some limitations for the use of content. And I think that's what I can think of right now.
Thank you. Yes, Renato, thoughts on that?
Yeah, as my closing thoughts, I think the AI committee should work in the sense to mitigate, correct, and anticipate problems.
Yes, I think so. So if we recap VibHab, let's look at some of your points that you brought up. We talked about serving everybody, about getting diverse inputs into this, and we talked about trust, and then you brought up politics as well, and that's in our title, isn't it? The practical side of this, the criticality of this, and the political side of this. Well, let's start with you, VibHab. There's a carrot and a stick here, I guess, isn't there? There's forcing companies to implement these sort of measures that check and manage their impact on societies. And there's the fact that you would hope that would be very good business for corporations. Where do you see the balance of power at the moment?
I think there's a catch up to regulate. So the balance of power is pretty much currently in favor uh, of corporates. But if you would, but the point there is that there's a general sense. If you look at from the concept of a social license, I would say that there's greater power in this in the political will to make sure things are done right, because there's a underlying point in social license, and we must keep in mind when we're thinking about this balance of power, is the fact that it's an impact to reputation. No business would like to be in a situation where anything that they do would impact their reputation adversely. No one really starts off with a bad intention in the first place. It's how it's applied, and just the way we can't foresee certain things in our own conversation, or we soothsayers can't predict what the world is going to be like. It's possible that people who are developing these systems also at some point cannot see what the end result might be. So if you're looking at the balance of power, I think the impact of reputation will guide it. And I think from the context of our topic of social licensing, I think it'll have to be it impacts everyone, but to bridge it occurs to it is my thought, and the panel could think on this. I think the practical and the political element is interconnected, because it's not practical to reach out to everyone. There has to be political will to sort of move and connect with the larger population. The critical components probably would be the people who you need to consult, and they're probably standing out and probably making themselves heard in the conversation for them to be on the table. That's just a very broad generalization, but if we connect three terms, then I think practical and political uh, join in, and the critical stands on its own. And that's how we strike the balance.
And we said we'd also talk about global versus local. The question came up quite a bit earlier about how do we have sort of global standards on this. there's certainly, Johan, there's certainly organizations that want to achieve that, aren't there? We've seen UNICEF put their content out recently. I'm not suggesting that you've read it and want to comment particularly on that document, but also the EU has very good intentions here, particularly around high-risk systems. Big question, Johan, but how useful do you think are these grand global documents in putting more governance and regulation into AI?
I think it's good that it's being done. It's better than it not being done. But we can compare it to climate change that we've touched on earlier. Over the last years, how many times have we not seen these events where all the rich and famous all fly somewhere, even if it's Davos for that matter, and they come out with great press releases and great intentions, and I don't necessarily doubt their intentions, but then not much happens, and then 3 or 4 years later there's another fantastic event. I don't know if it's just because of human nature and that democracy is in my opinion still the best system of governance that we have, even though it's fundamentally flawed. A great definition is that it's the engineering of consent, but we need these policy documents. Hopefully it'll make people think. I mean, if I speak on behalf of what's happening here in South Africa, Timi, I don't know what's the case in Nigeria, but October of last year, Richard and everyone, we had the results of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. A lot of media hype. And this commission came out with fantastic recommendations around societal impact, education, and the like. And we are now in just over a year later, and nothing else has happened. Because in our country, we're struggling to keep the lights on at the moment. We are essentially in the second industrial revolution. So I think, again, if you take almost your first world hat off this issue, and if you think of where most people on this planet live, struggling to feed themselves, struggling to have power, never mind digital connectivity or education, I think it's an elitist thing in a way, and I'll end off with that. That it's better that we do it than not. To have these great organizations publish these things, think tanks, how it will impact the average man or woman out there in the world, who most of us on this call can't even identify with, because we've got electricity, we are going to eat tonight, we have safety. I think that's the challenge. How do we move it from a fairly elitist, almost academic pursuit to something that impacts everyone? I don't have the answer. I don't know if others have something to add to that. I don't know.
I think it's an incredible point, and I'd love someone to interrupt me here and share their thoughts on what Johan just said. Maybe from a personal perspective, I mean, we all are what we are. None of us chose, where to live and where to be born and how tall to be, what color to be. That most CEOs on the FTSE 100 are 6 foot or over. Did you know that in terms of diversity? There isn't any. They're all tall. So, these are all bizarre things that show up. I think, was there more Johns on the FTSE 100 than there were women at one point or something? But none of us chose this. So I think, we have to, well, we always do, Vibhab will echo this, we have to come at this with a kindness to each other and to ourselves. And none of us clearly can wear the boots of others around the world, but we can have great motivations and great intentions and great flaws and keep learning every single day. Who would like to share their own personal experience from this, as I'm sharing a little bit about mine there? Rupa, would you perhaps share yours, or perhaps one of the, I see Vibhab, you unmuted. Do you want to share your perspective on how you feel?
What I feel that, AI, artificial intelligence, is just a reflection of our human society, and it just magnifies our intentions or who we are as a society, whether good or for bad. So, we need to be better humans if we intend to have a better technology. And as far as trust and social licensing and trust acceptance is concerned, most of us can relate to that as a society we are losing trust in each other. And if we share, for example, I share a secret with my friend, and she made it public. So there is a trust issue, and how can we think of creating trust with such technologies? So as AI is just a reflection of us, so we need to be better humans, so that we can have better technology, and we reap the fruits of this technology, which could be beneficial for each one of us. And also, we require uh, although we require legal, formal and informal licenses, but we also need to we need a cultural shift and mindset shift. We require better teachers, better leaders, and better religious leaders to create a better world for ourselves.
Thank you so much. Vipab, you would like to add to that, I think.
Yeah. Just 2 points. I think the point Johan brought up is absolutely relevant. I think the fact that there is a segment of the population that is struggling for very basic needs. In that context, when you look at artificial intelligence, these conversations they seem to completely disconnected. But that's the point that I want to highlight here, is that I think kindness and the fact that how do we, if this is a gap, our goal is always to reduce the gap, and that's the endeavor, and that then we should be keep moving towards that. No one really chooses to be in the position they're in. It's what you choose to do once you're in a particular position that matters. So I think the answer, a possible answer to that would be that these are both simultaneous conversations. There will always be, which is why, and this will tie back to the political point for social license, right? Because there will be a certain level of government intervention at some point. If you're looking at social license in the real impact everyone's sense. If you're looking at social licensing, that we're talking about, we've got these interested communities, we've taken a stakeholder consultation, we've closed it, then we can manage. So it's how we're viewing it. I think it'll always remain a simultaneous conversation, and I think it's always moving towards reducing the gap. We have to address that, and we have to address uh, the way we're moving, because uh, one pulls up the other. If I mean, AI or all of these developments will pull up the other if done with kindness, if done with whatever works the world a better place in terms of good intention.
Yes, thank you. And no matter what happens in the world, we can have kindness and empathy here in this space and our own little world. Renato, there's an educational element to this, though, isn't there?
Yes, there is a digital gap nowadays in society. Reskilling and upskilling, and mainly the newer generations, they use social media and the digital media without knowing the consequences, unintended consequences of the use of the technology. So education of the consequences of the technology. There are many studies that have been doing that they create kind of dopamine, it's like a dopaminic circuit in the brain that becomes addiction. So I think the education to technology, the use of technology, is a thing that need to be discussed. Is an issue.
Yes, very much so. Team, thank you very much today. This is a challenging topic and one that we have to put ourselves into. We've had a 4-continent discussion today, and to kind of summarize a little bit, and I'd love to get some final thoughts just before we sign off, but there's a whole bunch of great work that goes on, understanding the dangers, the tsunami, if you like, of what the digital divide can look like, and the inequalities that are plausible and possible from the extended use of AI. And there is a great awareness of that in certain areas, and a political will to change that. I mean, let's not forget the governments, they want to break up your Googles and your Metas and so on, and they have the very best of intentions in doing that. There's a lot of great people working in ethical AI. It's a very difficult field because, like we've been discussing today, every area, every tribe, every country has different needs and different sense of right and wrong and so on. But we value and appreciate their work. One area that we do question in MKAI is the kind of responsible AI world, because that can be a little bit more of the self-governance. And unfortunately, maybe this is just my opinion, we don't see enough from corporations yet. We still see a lot of talk and not enough walk when it comes to, ethical AI, diversity, climate. These jokes are wearing thin as they pretend to care and don't. So to say that they're responsible is pretty meaningless, unfortunately, at the moment. So hence we've been on the topic today. So what are the drivers then of a social license? Timi, like you described in mining, you can't just come in and break earth and start burning this and emitting that and polluting that. That doesn't work. And similar to here, it doesn't work to go in with a social media tool that's shown to significantly increase suicides in teenage girls. And this isn't easy, because Instagram didn't look like that, did it, a few years ago? It looked like it was great. And the stuff right now that we'll say, this is great for climate, this is great for healthcare. And in 10 years, we'll go, oh, good Lord. Wow. Didn't see that coming. Like Johan says, the power of foresight, we all wish we had more of it. But these conversations are important. I have the confidence to say that because I've seen 2 years of these conversations and the impact it's having and the people that we're reaching and the projects that we're launching into to create change. And just message me on LinkedIn if you want to hear about some of the big plans we have for 2022 and how you can support and get involved and all those good things. Who would like to have a final word on this subject? Who's got some closing statements that we could finish with today? Johan, you came off mute immediately, so I'll come to you.
Richard, thank you. I've learned so much by listening to everyone. And that's what I love about attending and speaking at these events. I learn a lot more than the 2 cents worth that I'm sharing. So that's been valuable. If we think of businesses and if we think of responsible AI, if you're in the C-suite, your responsibility is not even to your stakeholders, it is to your shareholders. So unless we change that balance, because if you're under pressure to make an extra 1 or 2 points in profit this year, then being responsible with the future of our children, climate change, how we use our algorithms, those things really, people don't really give a crap about it. That's the problem. There's a lot of good initiatives in the world about responsible business practices, and it's good. And maybe we'll get to a tipping point at some stage. But we've all worked in I'm sure in kind of jobs where you're under pressure to hit certain numbers. And if it's about your career and feeding your family, then who cares about whether the AI is responsible or not? And that's the challenge, to change that mindset from that profit first, not caring for anyone else. And Viap, I love the fact that you spoke about kindness, human nature. Those things are important. The trick is just, and I'll end with this, how do we mix this drive for business growth and those kind of things with being human and leaving something for our children? I leave you with no answers because I don't know, but it's worth asking the question. Thanks, Richard.
We appreciate you very, very much, Johan, and we'll be hearing from you in the new year. I hope you'll come back and spend some more time with us.
Thank you.
Timi, some final thoughts from you, please.
Thank you so much. Johan mentioned, the concept of profit and shareholders. I find that quite interesting, and I will touch on that rounding off. However, I want to say that the concept of social licensing, which is built on LCT, which is legitimacy, credibility, and trust. However, it cannot happen except there is some level of co-ownership, right? So the key word here is co-ownership. And how do we drive, co-ownership? Richard, you mentioned, examples of how do you drive information or communication around increased adoption, co-ownership for artificial intelligence. And I think the Singaporeans seem to have a model, which is, the fulcrum of artificial intelligence is data. And when we talk about AI ethics, we are basically talking about data. It starts from data ethics, right? Data credibility and all that comes around that. And you see, interestingly, issues of data ethics has become a subject taught at the what you call it secondary school, they call it high school, whatever, as part of the ongoing curriculum, which is basically dives down to what Rupa is doing, in our country, trying to drive, co-ownership through, educating people about artificial intelligence and how it affects them. Because on the long run, if you can start early, with the children, with the teenagers, before survival becomes the issue, these people then are able to, both on the demand and the supply side, on the demand side, there is an increased consciousness to be able to demand for AI that works not just for the now, but for the future. Because you cannot have a set of rules that will guide the future, but you can somehow preempt set of rules that will guide the future. And that's why evolution is a part of the human person or the human race, or and so as the future evolves, then set of rules will come. But for now, let's start with the good we can, right? As much as we can do that. And I think to drive that good, which comes back to what Johan mentioned, profitability, right? So for me, there are two wheels. You have political will, and then we must add corporate will. But in order for the corporate will to be fully incentivized towards driving the direction of an AI for the future, an AI that respects the SDGs, an AI that respects fundamental human rights, then we need to have political will, finding strategic ways to incentivize profitability, right? Around what works for now and the future. And so those are my thoughts primarily. Thank you so much, Richard, for the opportunity. Yeah,
Timi, I'm voting for you, man. I'm just smiling because I'm just realizing that my day job is listening to you. I've got the best job in the world. I could just listen to you all day talk about this stuff. You're so eloquent.
Thank you.
God, I wish I had your brain. I really do, but never mind. We get what we get. Vibhav, Renato, perhaps a quick word from you, and then Vibhav, who opened today, could take us home if that's okay.
I think what Timi just told is summarize all the discussion. I think that not only government, I think private sector can have policies in place, AI ethics, like committees with diversity and inclusion, with people with different backgrounds, different perspectives. I think we can have opportunities, more opportunities to incentivize innovation in communities. You can kind of spread the opportunities for AI learning in communities. I think it would be, you'd be enhancing innovation on one side, and you'd be playing a social role in the other, and matching with that social responsibility and cybersecurity designing in the designing of AI. I think Johan may agree with me, Vibhav.
Yes, thank you. Renato, keep up your writing, please. I love reading it. I love enjoying it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your closing thoughts. Rupa, of course, to you, and then we'll finish with Vibhav.
Yeah, I believe that every one of us, including businesses and corporations and governments, they need to adopt a futuristic approach and having a long-sightedness, understanding the impact of technology and the profit generating machines, so that our, and the major concern what I feel about is our younger generation, who are going to be the real stakeholders of this planet, as well as we need to be although if we do not trust our governments and organizations, at the individual level also, we need to be more aware about the consequences. We need to be conscious about our activities and our indulgence with these technologies. And I think, the consciousness and awareness is one thing that we should do at the individual level.
And 2022 is going to be your year, isn't it, Rupa? It's
Thank you.
big year for you and your business. Can't wait to see what happens.
Thank you.
Vibhav, with you, and then I'll say a final word and we'll close.
Sure. So this is the first time, I must say this for our audience who's listening. This is the first time I have seen an MKI event going over time. Is to do with the topic, because we have so much to unpack. If Jason is listening to us, she'd realize what going over time means. Now, coming back to the closing, I think there are 4 points that have come up from the conversation, and there are 5 questions that I want to close this with. Points are: it's a once in a generation opportunity. It impacts everyone. We need to spread the benefits, and these are all spoken by our speakers here. And then just this is the fourth one, is the integrated automated decisions. Social licensing is not relevant, only is maybe irrelevant for certain users of AI, but it's very much relevant for certain specific users of AI. And of course, political will has come up. Now, when we are closing, the 5 questions that I think are important from a social licensing perspective, again, open-ended questions, much like Johan, don't seek to answer them, but I think we need to think on them. One, what is AI? We need to be very clear about what is AI to know what is real-world AI. Two, where do you want AI to go? Do you want to use AI for everything? Where do you want to apply AI? Three, if you have frameworks in place, are they going to be pieces of paper, or do you want them to create practical frameworks that work, that tell me clearly what do I need to do? Four, because we are looking at the practical element for messaging everyone, what is the objective of our messaging? What is the impact that we want to create? And eventually the culmination of it, does that result in a net positive? And the final question from a social licensing perspective, which connects to both practical, political, and critical, is who do you want to serve?
I'm humbled to be in the company of the 5 of you. You are 5 of the most compassionate and kind people that I have the great pleasure of spending time with. And it is stunning how much each of you care and work so hard in this area, knowing what's coming and working hard to create a better future. Thank you. As the year draws to a close, thank you for everything you've all done this year. Thank you for the continued work you do. We stand by you. We're here to support you, and vice versa, for any ways that we can to lift you up and rise your work and the importance of your words. So you just tell us what you need. Come back, share with us again soon. And thank you so very much for your fine company today. And of course, to those who joined us on the chat and to watch. And if you would stay back for 30 seconds so I can just say an informal thanks as well. We'll end the broadcast. Thank you, everybody, again.
Thank you.